You're listening to Wanderlust Diaries, the ultimate travel podcast for solo female travellers 40 and beyond who are ready to explore the world. Join me, Terry Reynolds, where we talk all things travel and why it's so important and what's stopping you from getting out there and exploring the world. We'll discuss the steps you can take now to fix it, empowering you to ignite your curiosity and set your heart free so that you have the confidence to travel wherever you want, whenever you want. Offering insights, tips, hacks, and remarkable women's stories along the way. So come on, grab your passport, pack your sense of adventure, and get ready to be inspired. Whether you're a first-time solo traveller or a seasoned globetrotter, Wanderlust Diaries is your community of like-minded souls, uplifting and supporting women over 40 who dare to explore. Welcome to today's episode of Wanderlust Diaries, and today I am joined by Holly Barnett. So hi Holly, thank you ever so much for joining me today. It's fantastic that you're here and being a guest on the podcast, so thank you so much. Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure, yes, thank you for having me. Really happy to be here. I'm actually I live in Canada, just a bit west of Toronto. And I've actually done a lot of traveling solo for work, as well as I started doing some trips that way. But yeah, I grew up riding in the horse industry, working with horses, and I have a couple horses. And I'm also into mountain biking. And my work originally was around saddle fitting and doing bodywork with horses, which I still do a little bit of. But I've actually pivoted towards wellness with the nervous system regulation and breath work. So a big life shift. Yeah, it just kind of it actually came through a little bit of a health crisis. It's always something that's like a little bit of a catalyst in life. And it was what worked for me. And then I just found myself really enjoying the space of working with the nervous system. And I actually ended up creating a signature style of breath work that I now share with other people. So it's just been this beautiful unfolding that started off in an uncomfortable place, but as we know, sometimes that's what it takes to shift gears and change tracks, and here we are.
Yes, absolutely, and I absolutely agree with that, because this podcast would not have happened unless I'd suffered burnout last summer.
There you go.
Something I always wanted to do, went into burnout, and this was born from it. So yeah, absolutely. You have to sometimes get very uncomfortable.
Yes.
To pivot, to turn,
totally.
take the right action. So love all that. Oh, there's a lot there to unpack, isn't there?
Yeah, very concise, but there's a lot there.
Yes, yeah, no, there is. So take us back then to to the beginning, I suppose. Where obviously your love of horses, like you said, you're in Canada.
Yes.
So your love of horses then. So I would imagine that you travelled around quite a bit. Maybe.
Yeah, so the love of horses started before I could speak. My mom would always say, like, you were always gravitating to like horse stuff and just always wanted to be around horses. So it was like a very innate calling of mine. And so I ended up getting into riding as a kid and being like, I call a barn brat or whatever, just like always wanted to be at the barn 8 days a week, 8 to 8. Like there was nowhere else I wanted to be. So really pretty into it. And then after high school, I learned that there was a program that you could take for 2 years to become a registered equine massage therapist. So I was like, what? Yes, sign me up. That was I graduated in 2001. So we're going back a few years. And there wasn't really that many people doing that yet. So it was a little bit of a pioneer career. And
so explain what that is a little bit.
Sure. So we know what massage therapy for humans, and we do like a 2,200 hour training around physiology, kinesiology, all aspects that go into being a registered massage therapist. So this program actually had created a equine version. So all the same requirements and prerequisites into an equine program. And so I went straight out of high school and straight into equine massage, and then got into doing that. I also worked as a veterinary assistant and office manager for an equine vet.
I'm getting a bit of a feel here. You like animals?
Little tiny bit. They're kind of, everyone's like, because I live alone, and they're like, do you ever get lonely? I'm like, I am not alone. I have, So it's they've always been a big part of my life for sure.
Oh my gosh! I mean, it all sounds amazing. So you went from school, and Yes, go on. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, yeah, right into the equine veterinary practice. And then we were like, oh, there's so many sore backs. Like, what's going on? The vet was a chiropractor. And we're like, there's so many sore backs. And we're like, well, the saddle was on the back. So let's start looking at that. And that led into, I'm the kind of person that when I get really curious about something, I'm like, I'll see you whenever I figure this out. And I'm gone and I'm figuring it out. And so that actually ended up being a 20-year watering hole. I call them watering holes instead of rabbit holes. I heard that once and I was like, that's actually really,
like
yeah, yeah. And so yeah, when it's kind of like following the trail of what lights you up, what interests you. And
Yeah,
so
that's amazing. I mean, I've not talked to anybody who's done this type of thing before. So, where would that take you from then? As you've got an interest in it,
yes.
yeah, you're curious about it.
Yeah.
So, like 20 years later, where do you end up going?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So I did a 6-month apprenticeship, which was a lot of in-shop bench work, learning how to sew leather and sew saddles and fix them and repair them and adjust them, like bench saddler stuff. Not building them from scratch. That's another respectable trade of its own. But I was the one that did the fittings. So I would go to the barns and see the horses and riders. So my job nature was to travel around all over North America by myself. And so I got kind of used. However, it was land or drive somewhere, work, and then go home. I don't have any regrets. But looking back, I wonder if I could have also added a little bit of travel and maybe rest on these trips where I actually explored a bit more, because it was like airport, hotel, barn, hotel, airport, home. Like there was not. And
yeah.
But that's just the way it was, and that's it's okay. And now I have the beauty of looking back, and I would do it differently, and I can do it differently now. So, but yeah, it was a lot of travel. Usually,
when you were traveling, and were you on your own? Was it solo travel, or was it? Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, how old were you then when you started?
I started at 24, traveling alone.
Okay, so it's quite young then, really, isn't it? So how did that manifest itself? How did you manage with that? Did it just come easy to you? Off you go, and you were actually.
There was parts, because there's a very adventurous side of me that's like, I'm not going to let a little bit of worry hold me back from like going exploring. But then there were parts about the way I was traveling that now look different. So, for example, if I was traveling alone and I wanted to eat, I would probably get the restaurant or something to take to my car and eat in private, because I was embarrassed to be eating alone.
Oh, yes.
So that was like one of the stories, that thing. And then I outgrew that in not too long. And then I was like eating at a table by myself and feeling a little uncomfortable. And then I was like, oh, you know what? This is actually totally like whatever. And then
you find as well, because obviously we all have to do that at some point, don't we?
It's just funny how the mind.
I'm like you, I mean, I did backpack around the world for a year, 20 odd years ago, but then following that gave me the confidence in work to go and, work, travel around the country on my own as well.
Yeah.
But it gets to a point where you either, like you said, you carry on sitting in the car, and not. And
what am I doing this for?
Don't get me wrong, there are times like that, though, aren't there, where you just like, oh, I can't be doing this. I just want to go sit in the car, or I want to go back to my hotel room, whatever it is. So there are times that you do that. So it's not always jolly hockey sticks, but
totally.
But yeah, so how did you make that transition? Was it just a case of, oh, shove this, I am going to sit in there,
Yeah, it really was. I was like, I no longer, like, I outgrew the habit, really, because I was like, this is not, like, I'm not, before it was alleviating the pressure of being perceived as being alone and eating alone, or some stigma that I didn't even know I had in my head, and I have no idea where I got it from, but it was no longer allowed to live rent-free. And yeah. And then I was like, okay, I'm in there. I still remember, I don't know if I remember the exact restaurant, but I remember the feeling of going like, I'm doing it. I'm sitting at a table by myself, kind of laughing at this. And then I was like, well, the thing about sitting alone at a table is that you're going to be not really talking to anyone, which some nights that's exactly what my preference would be. But I'm like, if I want to actually be a little bit more social as a solo traveler, I should start eating at the bar. So then that was my next move, was to just eat at the bar, and then you can start to chat with people. So
yes,
enrich your experience that way.
No, it's quite surprising how quickly you just get over it.
Oh, it was like a page turned in a book.
Yeah, it's like when you think back on it, you think, oh my gosh, all that time I spent doing that. And, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And I think there's a perception, isn't there? It's the perception.
It
Is
probably
your,
comes from school. Like no one wanted to be the school kid that ate lunch
yeah,
alone or something. That's probably where it stemmed from. I
yeah,
don't think I had a ton of that experience, but there's some stigma that came in to our awareness at some point, and
yes.
there it was.
And you just imagine everyone's looking at you and thinking, oh, that poor person. But what was I saying to, I think I said this on one of the previous podcasts. I said, they're probably all looking and thinking, oh, how lucky is she being on her own?
She's so confident.
You.
Yeah, she's on her own schedule. Doesn't. Yeah, I know the two-way vision of scenarios is like forever fascinating with what the perceptions are.
No, I know exactly. So we make these stories up in our head that this is happening, that, and it's all just a story. If you just stop and think about it, just think, oh, just be quiet. It's all good.
When I work with my clients on the nervous system mentorship, we do a little bit of subconscious work as well. And I'm like, get your story gun out, and like these thoughts will rotate through. Don't try to suppress them. Like they're going to come up, but just recognize that's a story. That's a story. And start noticing how many times you're actually being having stories pop up that are not like, we don't have enough context. We are stories because we don't know the rest of the information, but our human nature is to fill in the blanks with a story that we think is true.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, when you realize it's just stories that we're telling ourselves, when you realize that, you can switch it off, because it'll come in. Yes, it has to come in and you have to process it, but it's recognizing it and managing it so that, yes, I recognize that. Thank you very much. But off you go because you're not serving me well at all.
Yeah, exactly. I made a pact with myself a couple years ago. I'm like, if I'm going to make up stories that aren't serving me, I'm going to make up a couple more stories that are, and at least even out the odds.
I love that idea. Yeah, need to pass that on.
Yeah, that's one that served me well.
Brilliant. I love that. And so what took you off then? So you've explained a little bit about, what you've done over the last few years. So have you been traveling further afield? Because I know you said when we spoke and messaged each other, you mentioned, going off mountain biking and all that type of thing.
Yeah.
So was that something new to you, or had you been off and done some traveling?
I had not traveled that much. So I got into mountain biking a little bit later. I didn't get into it till I was about 36. And I had wanted to, and then finally I just made some life changes, and I just started, like, when I joined a couple groups, I didn't know how to change the gears on my bike. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where the trails were. I didn't have any bike friends, and I was like, again, solo person. It's like not traveling, but I'm joining these groups not knowing anybody. So I still remember rolling up to the first bike meeting going, oh my gosh, this is so uncomfortable. Yeah. And I'm still good friends with the people I met that day.
Yes, it's fantastic. And I think, especially these days with the advent of, Facebook pages, Facebook groups, all of that thing, those things, when you're going somewhere, no matter what country, what area.
There's people that want to join you. They want to share the sport, share the land. Like they just love to, good vibes. And I've met so many incredible people mountain biking. Like I was like, oh, this is where they're all hiding. Like it was just such a wonderful, because I'd gotten myself into that workaholic state where I didn't really have a social life. I still have my friends, but like everyone's kind of scattered and you catch up when you can, but not like a regular, like I was laughing. I was like, wow, I see my mountain bike friends so much more than all of my other friends that have been in my life for so much longer. And we see them like often, like sometimes we're riding a couple of times a week. And so it was neat. But I remember being so uncomfortable showing up to like one of the best decisions I ever made.
Yes, exactly. And how do you manage the anxiety around that, of going somewhere, meeting people for the first time, knowing that you're going to meet a group of people? I do this. Over the last few years, I've moved around quite a lot just because I sold my house and I can just rent now and I can move whenever I want to. So whenever I go to a new place, I do that, and I look at the local groups, walking groups or whatever it might be. And, the first time I did it, it was a bit, apprehensive, I suppose. But now it's just a matter of fact that that's how I'm going to meet people. So this is what I do. So how was it for you when you first started doing that and just kind of rocking up? Saying,
I have this one thing I've noticed with myself is I tend to go into this like kind of silly humor. Like I'll be I like make things a bit jokey. So that's kind of my go-to, is to maybe try and make a little bit of a laugh. It makes myself feel better. But what's really where I am now, because I think that discomfort idea, and I wouldn't say it's the same at all, but there's that idea that it might be uncomfortable to meet new people even at this point in the game. And it really comes down to feeling comfortable with yourself. And
Oh,
that is, when you feel comfortable like with yourself, then everything else is more comfortable. So it's like the fear of the unknown. What is this going to
yeah.
make me feel? Well, if I don't let outside um, things and people have agency over how I feel, then it's not able to feel so bad. And so, and then I also am thinking, well, if I'm in the awkwardness, probably everybody else might be a little bit. So what can I do to extend some anti-anxiety vibes to outwards so that we can just sort of like get past the first? For me, it really came down to that. And I will say a shameless breath work plug is that when you're connected with your breath, it's like you're just connecting
Yeah,
with your body. And that just has,
yeah,
and that's not just my personal experience. Like everyone who's worked with me, that's like a consistent thread that we're like, oh, you just feel so much like everything's okay. You're
yeah.
breathing.
Yeah, no, I know, and I know a couple of people are practitioners
Yes.
of breath work. So maybe you could explain a little bit about what breath work is,
Mhm.
because a lot of listeners probably not heard of it or might want to know a little bit more about it. So what
Yeah,
is it exactly?
kind of
Yeah,
exciting because I was talking about how the equine massage is like a little bit of a pioneer, and I'm like, here I am again, and I guess that's just one of
exactly.
the,
Yeah.
but it's exciting because it's really growing quickly, and the benefits are incredible, and there's lots of science backing it as well. So I think my personal thought, and I'm sure lots of people are going to resonate with this, is why would I need breath work? I breathe. Like,
Yes.
what? This is like an automatic
Okay.
process.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of snake oil is this? So that I started off with this, like, are you sure this is a thing? And
Yeah.
then it absolutely is. And what's important for people to know is that our modern lifestyle is
Mm,
not conducive to healthy breathing practice.
mm,
We're sitting a lot. We're on our
yes.
phones. We're on our computers. We're very forward and
Yeah.
bent over, which is actually obstructing. And we don't really we think about, got to stay hydrated. We got to get our vitamins and minerals and our
Mm,
protein and yada, yada. What if it's our most vital nutrient? What can we go the
mm,
least amount of time without? It's air,
mm,
oxygen.
mhm.
And so when we think about our breath and then we feel when we breathe in, and then you can do like a 10-second little mini check in with it, just go ahead and float your vertebrae back one by one and just allow your vertebrae to sort of stack over their center of gravity. And then notice what happens to your breath and notice how that feels when you're in that posture, that open. So all of a sudden your
Mm,
body can receive so much air. So
mm.
I love to talk about breath until like I'm like my new life goal is to talk about breath until everyone's annoyed with it. But because it's so important and we just take it for granted. I did it as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
And so I always encourage my clients to hijack a habit you already have. How many of
Mm,
us are checking our phones more than we care to admit? Most
mm,
of us. It's by
mm,
design. It's just like how it's made. So
mm.
now my rule of thumb is sure, I can check it. Posture, breath, check. So
Yeah.
I retrained my body's default breathing pattern to be more
Mm,
open and allow
mm,
that air in more easily. And then you go back to your lifestyle posture and
mm,
it's all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's hard. Like there's less access. So that's one of the big things, the big shifts.
mm. And I absolutely get that because I do it myself.
Yeah.
I make sure because, like you said, we're like this, and I make sure I
Yes.
bring myself up.
Yes.
There are even like gadgets now that you can put over your shoulder, aren't there? So you can have your
Yeah.
phone in
Yeah.
front of you, that type of thing. So obviously it's a thing because they brought these gadgets out, if you like, to
Yeah.
accommodate all
Yeah.
of us doing exactly the same thing and to
Totally.
hopefully stop us all walking around looking like we've got a hunchback,
Like they have
lots of
tones, they've
things.
got terms called like text neck and all of these things, and we know that it's not good for us. But the thing about habits is that there's a dopamine addiction that's attached to this, and so to just kind of it's modern lifestyle, it's not going to go away. So we need to adapt instead of maladapt to our lifestyles. But breathwork
Yes.
in definition, like for me, it's really about the conscious awareness and manipulation of your breathing pattern. Most of us have, I think it's about 80% of the population, somewhere around there, have at least one form of breathing dysfunction, and about 50% have two. And they don't have to be major breathing dysfunctions. They're probably off the radar. I didn't know I was only a chest breather until I got into mountain biking. And so when I changed that, I was like, wow, I've been living with scraps of my optimization capacity. And so it was just such a big doorway open, and then everything else gets easier once you're like, but you can't be healthy if you're not breathing properly. And that's just not talked about.
I remember reading that years ago about, and I can't remember the percentage, but it said the percentages of our lungs. So we only use 10% of our lungs, or something. It was something ridiculously low that we only use. And obviously, then all this has come out with around breathwork. So, what would be your like top 3 tips then for breathwork? You know, if somebody who's just listening to this for the first time and thinking this is something I need. I mean, obviously, when we publish this podcast, I will put all your details in the show notes. So if anybody wants to contact you and take this further, absolutely, they can do that. But for anybody who's listening now,
just those little Easter eggs.
Let's do it together, Holly.
So first thing first is you want to ensure that you're breathing through your nose. One of the things that happens to a lot of people is they end up not noticing that they're breathing through their mouth. And so your nitrous oxides only produced in your nasal cavity. So you're not getting that really some of your nutrients that way. Your body's not producing. And you're also taking air and it's not clean into your body when you're going through your mouth. So it's not getting filtered. So you're breathing in pure, whatever your environmental air is. So there's and it'll actually change your face structure. So mouth breathe, you get a change in your face structure. It's really wild when they see, especially with kids that have been course corrected and had intervention on their breathing style, how much their face changes. So if you breathe properly, you actually even look more beautiful. So there's So it's health is one thing, but if we want to add a little bit of, everyone wants to look good as well.
That's amazing, that is. And is this something that, for those people who are going to be traveling, is this something that they can just do whilst, if they're getting a bit anxious or whatever, this is something they can do as well?
Like when I work with my clients, we have like a little, I call it like a little bouquet of breath styles. So if like I've got a friend, she's like, oh, I was getting really anxious in a crowd or something like that, or anxious flying. And so if you double the length of your exhale, you're going to decrease the fight or flight sympathetic response. It's going to lower your heart rate. A lot of times people think, oh, take a big breath if you're nervous. Well, the deep breath changes your diaphragm goes down and the heart is going to expand with that. And then as the diaphragm comes up, so it's going to change the heart rate based on, because your breath and heart rate are very closely linked. And then your heart sends 10 times more information to your brain than your brain sends to your heart. So whatever's happening with your heart, which is being modulated by your breath, is giving your brain something to respond to, saying this is good, this is anxious. So you can actually work with your breath to decrease episodes of feeling anxiety, but also even to panic. But as a general toolkit, one of the ones I love to share with my clients, really simple, double the length of your exhale. So if you're breathing in for 3, exhale for 6, 4, 8, 5, 10. And that will bring you down into a sense of peace, like lower the heart rate. If we want to, sometimes you sit down and you're like, I just can't focus. My brain is everywhere. Drop into box breath. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. Do that for about 60 seconds to a couple minutes. That just brings you into focus. So it's not only just for oxygenating the tissues, but then all of a sudden it's affecting our mood. And so then, so there's a couple of the things that I also do clearing breaths, where I usually do those in my breath club. And that's where things just don't feel like, everything just kind of feels a little bit hectic and focus isn't really the aim. I just want to clear out whatever I'm feeling. And so I'll do an inhale, hold, and then just blow it out through pursed lips. And that just feels like a nice decompression. My little nephew, I taught him, if he feels upset, to go outside and blow the clouds away. And he will go out, just a second, and he's got to go out. He blows, so there's all kinds of ways. And I love teaching it to young people as well.
Wow, because I've got an 8-year-old grandson. So,
so
I could I say 8, he's actually 7 at the moment, but he'll be coming.
Yeah, it's a very similar
Well,
age.
that's something he could,
If they get a little frustrated, they're having a moment, and it's like they're still learning how to process those emotions.
Yeah.
Just let that happen. So
Oh, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love. Well, thanks for that. Yeah, some nice little tips there. And like I said, anybody who wants to take this further with you, they can contact you.
I have a breath community, and I also do one-to-ones, but we've got like a really cool breath club that we meet twice a week, and get into it. So
wow, okay. And where do you think that can take you now? Now that you're doing this, is this something that you might take into maybe corporate world?
Yeah, I have thought about that. And I am actually going to a biohacking conference in a couple of days and going to promote it there too. Just for me, I love working with people who are just like, ooh, I never thought about this. What can it do for me? And then witnessing what it does for them. It really is applicable to anyone. I would love to also, I love the idea of corporate because I think it can really help teams and coherence and getting into flow state and getting the brain waves like harmonized. There's so many benefits that can apply to corporate. I also I love working with equestrians and helping them relationship with the horse because the horses will sync up and breath work with them as well. And then I'd love to also, I've got a lot of big plans, but bringing it into the lives of younger people. I think, maybe sports teams, and just if we can help kids with their breathing earlier on. I watched him with me. He was hanging out, but I've seen him. He gets on the couch and then he was going to look at something like a little iPad, and the neck goes down. And I'm like, oh no, there's the breathing right off. And I've noticed in myself, when I'm on my phone, I'll catch myself holding my breath unconsciously. And so I really think that breath and kids needs to become, I think that can be hugely impactful in a positive way to help them because it's so essential to their health, mental and physical. And we just want to counter, like lifestyle is lifestyle, modern is what it is. But how do we counter these habits with healthy ones?
And I think you're right, get to the kids young, going to schools even, it'd be fantastic because it's all about prevention, isn't it? It's getting to everybody early enough to stop.
I didn't learn how to breathe into my whole lungs until I was almost 40. Like we could prevent that from, I didn't know I wasn't breathing. And actually I had scoliosis and breathing deep hurt. So I didn't like breathing deep because everyone's talking deep breath. I'm like, oh, it hurts me. And I have scoliosis and I don't know what to do about it. So I was stuck there for a long time. And I was in a bike race, an 8-hour bike race, and you do these big laps and you have a team. And I was like, well, I'm on a team. I got to push past the pain. And then finally I started breathing into my lower lungs and I started coughing like I'd been smoking my whole life. It was like, I was like, what? And I realized I'm clearing because I finally accessed my full lung capacity because I went from chest to, I had to breathe deeper. So that was like my big light bulb moment. I was like, there's something I got to learn about this.
You were literally clearing your lungs, weren't you? By doing that. Yeah. No, I know. And I've done something similar. I've done something similar.
Then
where is this coming from? Where is it coming from? And obviously you realize what it is. But I love that idea of, getting to the children, getting to them.
It's going to make it fun and interesting, right? It's not going to be like the same as that. Like adults need the mindful, like it's helpful to have the mindful, like down regulation style. Maybe a bit of like my sessions are like slow and they're very potent, but very subtle. And it's just the voice talking through an inner journey. But that's not going to be what kids, like we got to get the kids in something that's going to be more relative to them. And so it makes it it's kind of like a fun challenge, I think.
I think so. And you know what? It's about, and they, what kids are like. They, they lose, their attention span is that of a gnat sometimes, isn't it? But do you know what it is though? It's about planting the seed.
Yes.
That something will go in, so therefore they remember this.
And he thinks it. He does it. And then we went for a little, I had him here and he went for a little pony ride and the pony was walking a little faster than he felt comfortable. It was his first time. He's like, how do I ask her to slow down? I said, slow breaths, slow your breath. And he's like, and then sure enough, and he had this big smile because it worked and she slowed as he slowed his breath. Yeah. He'll never forget that.
No, absolutely not. This is what I'm saying. Start them young, plant the seeds, and then from that it'll grow. And it may be something they don't really take on straight away. but it'll
Exactly.
always be there,
It
you
won't be
know?
new. It'll be
Yeah,
exactly. It's there. It's part
yeah,
of the process. And like his dad's also really open to it, and so he does have it a little bit around him now. And I just love that we just when he came, I'm like, it's just part of the day. Like, oh, we're doing a breath
yeah.
work now. And yeah,
Oh,
he
it's
thinks it's
amazing.
fun.
It's amazing,
Yeah,
yes. And like kids are sponges, aren't they?
yeah.
You know, they just
And,
take,
if you do it for 60 seconds, that's impactful.
yes, of
That's the
course it
beauty
is.
of breath work too, is it's instantaneous.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and so are you still working with saddles and that side of thing?
Yeah. So what I've done is I retired from being a saddle fitter, but I do offer consulting services.
Oh,
So it's kind of like an all-in-one, a little bit of bodywork, saddle fit, and everything else that is appropriate to help them get where they want to go with their horse. So it's a little bit of that. So I do offer a couple spots a month, and yeah, it's been wonderful.
wow. And what about travel now for you then? What does travel look like for you?
It's been a little bit less the last while, but I'm going to do a couple clinics on travel, and then my goal is next year to get some big bike trips back in. Like I'm due
Mm,
for need to get back on the bike, and I would like to go back to Italy. Actually, that was such a
mm.
great place to ride, and I mean I'm open to going other places as well. And
Yeah,
some of my bike friends have now traveled a bit since then. There was a little bit of inspiration that happened, which was really cool because they went and did the trip I had went on the year later and had a great time. And so now it's like, okay, let's do it again.
yeah. So which part of Italy is that?
So I first went to Trevinia, so right near Switzerland, and rode near the Matterhorn. And then I rode there for 3 days actually in a row, which was
Mm.
quite a lot. And then I got
Mm.
back in my little Panda and drove over to the Dolomites and did a day
Oh,
there. And I would love to go back because I was pretty tired and maybe a little beat up that day, but I still got out there and rode. But I'd love to go back and really experience that again.
yeah, wonderful. I mean, what is it you get from traveling? You know, what does it give you? What's the transformation for you?
Yeah, I really think there's some deep power in changing up your environment, changing up your routine, and just having nothing familiar, nothing to trigger your subconscious going into the old day in, day out, even though like my days are often very different at home just on what I'm doing. But
Mm.
when you're in a new environment and I love being in nature in other places as well. So I always want to know what their nature's like because it's just how does it smell? What's the dirt like? I just love being anywhere with running water and woods is kind of my home away from home. So it's just it's the feelings of awe and inspiration. Like
Mm.
they've even done some studies that when you're in that state of awe, like the first time you see the Grand Canyon, you're going to be in a state
Yeah,
of awe. And there's like
yes,
some pretty big changes that happen in your brain even from that experience.
yeah,
And like the second or third time you go see it, you're like, oh, it's cool, but it's not the same as the first. So I
yes.
love going out and getting that awe inspiration feeling
Experience.
for the first
Yeah,
time, something new for the first time.
yeah. There's just something about it, isn't there, that it gives you something that you can't really explain or pass on.
Yeah, I think sometimes the English language just doesn't have all
Yeah,
of the
it doesn't
things that we
cover it.
want to
Yeah.
say. There's things that can't be said that are amazing.
Yes, yeah, you just have to go and feel it for
Mhm.
yourself. And, you
Yeah.
know, I'm all about that, telling anybody who wants to listen, you know, just go and do it because once you've
Yeah.
done it,
It's you know, the things that you never forget are the ones that made the biggest impact on how you feel.
and that's it. You'll always have the memories. You'll always have that feeling,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, it doesn't matter.
Transfer things.
You know,
Yeah.
we could tell somebody until forever, you know, but until you actually go and do it and then come back, go away, go do it, come back and
Yeah.
tell me
Yeah.
how that made you feel.
And that first big trip, it totally changed so much for me because I'd done traveling before, but again, it was more work related. And I've done solo traveling, but it was like on a mission work related. That was the first big full on vacation I took as a solo. And I was like, I am changing my life after this. Like
Yeah.
I really thought I went out there knowing that my business was kind of like the driver and I was the engine.
Mm.
And out there, I'm like, that's got to get a role reversal. Like the engine is going to become the business and I need to, like, I can turn this into a work and travel
Love
and
that. Love
yeah,
that
it really was
analogy.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic analogy that is. And so you said you put your bike into the back of your Panda.
Well, it took up the whole Panda. I had to put
You
down
said,
the passenger seat had to go forward. Like there was like I was like, oh, I might need to get a bigger car. I don't think this is gonna fit. But I angled it and shimmied it and got it in there. And off I went driving across northern Italy with my panda and my bike and just, yeah.
And like, how were you anxious about that? Driving in a totally.
I really wasn't. Even though it was kind of like, wow, this is so different. I was just so ready to go on an adventure, and I just felt like I was in my element on an adventure. I had done some other, like the other trip that was really adventurous was also backpacking around Europe. I was with a couple of friends, and there was a couple of days I was on my own. But I was just like, wow, so many days where you wake up in a row and you don't know what you're going to do. You don't know who you're going to meet. Like that sense of wonder, you don't get at home. Like that is, and it takes a couple of days for that shift to really set in place. And so I always promise myself, like, I want that feeling back. Like I want to do more trips that make me have that feeling again, where I'm like, I'm just in this sense of like different timeline, different freedom. And so this felt like I was honoring that promise I made to myself in my 20s. Like, we're on an adventure and we're just going to go do. I read a Red Bull article, and it was only a year and a half after I started riding. And I read this Red Bull article about riding at the Matterhorn. And I was like, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, I'm going. Yeah.
That's happening. And it happened, and it was awesome.
Yeah, I love that, because the thing is, it's when you see things like that and you just know you're going to do it.
Yes.
And it's that experience, isn't it, that makes you want to go and do it, because you're thinking, I can do it. So, I'm just going to do it.
And it made no sense. Like, I didn't have the bike skills I hadn't been riding that long, and it was way above my peak. It made no sense, but it was like this, like soul urge of, you're doing this. And I'm like, but I don't know how. It doesn't matter. Do it. I'm like, okay. And it was, there was all kinds of like huge emotional experiences that were like, oh, like amazing, but it was just like, wow, like there was some surreal, again, the language is not available, but it was
no, I know, and I know exactly what you mean. And it's that thought of, if you don't do it, it's worse than the fear of actually going to do it, because you get a bit anxious with something that's totally brand new and a bit adventurous, that type of thing, but the actual thought of not doing it, I think, is even worse.
Well, it's like the comfort is the killer, and it's like the crusher of dreams. And there's so many reasons. Like, it's okay to have some angles and degrees of comfort in life, but don't let it do the slow, quiet, don't let it snuff you out without living your life.
Absolutely. And there was a study done, and it was a lot of elderly people who were in homes, you might have heard this yourself, where they were asked, it's kind of towards the end of their lives, what is it that you regret? And they all said, the things I didn't do. Just go out there and live your life and just do it.
We have this amazing, incredible planet that you can do anything, anywhere, pretty much. And it's like, you ask most people what they want to do, and they don't know, because it's been so low on the value list. They don't even have a proper answer, and that makes it hard to go do when you don't really know what you want to do.
Well, when you think about it, you think about when we're kids, our dreams are there, we don't stop, the things that we draw, that we, that we imagine, all of those things. You get to a certain age, that stops, because we are conditioned.
And it's the imagination is like a kid's term, right? Like, oh, that's fun, use your imagination. That is not a kid's term. That is where everything on the planet started. That is like the intangible reality that is coming to the tangible reality. Is this world, this magical idea of imagination. It's the most powerful thing in the world, and we're all like, oh, it's the kids. And it's like, no.
I know, and it's and it's this thing about as well about age, saying, when you get to a certain age, I can't do that. Well, I was 39 when I went. I turned 40 when I went away and backpacked around the world for a year, And if you'd have told me at 1920, I would never, ever have believed anybody who'd said that to me, because at that age, I was not ready to do anything. I was married. I was having a baby, and it's different. It's when it's your time. So
it's different seasons.
You don't have to go out at 16, 20, 22. You don't have to do it at that age. But at some point, there's going to be something inside you that'll make you want to do that.
Like the cliche, like follow what lights you up. And it's like, no, really follow those whispers, those like inspirations where like, oh, I'm interested in that. Like, that's always the thread to follow. It's never going to lead you astray. And it's always leading you to some grand prize, really.
It is, isn't it? You know, and one thing leads to another. Just because you're going off, you know, from A to B doesn't mean that you're going to end up at B.
Yeah,
the
gist of you following that like light, all of a sudden, like everything starts to reconspire to like support that more. It's just so fun to watch on people. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I know absolutely that, you know, because I started off with, I was just going to go to Greece for 6 months. I was, you know, and just the next thing I bought a round the world ticket for a year. You know, so it's allowing, you know, if I'd have just said, oh no, I can't do that, I'm just going to go to Greece for 6 months and then come back, you know, but you have to,
like that's what you said, like the limiting thoughts that hold us back, and then the disbelief that it could be easy and that it's what we're meant to experience. Like there's all these oh, I could never, and it's like, yeah, you could. Like, why couldn't you? Yeah.
And you know, anybody who's listening to this, I'm not saying that, you know, it's so easy to just go and do it, because it's not. Sometimes you have to, you know, take those baby steps, the small steps to get you to wherever you want to go, and there's nothing wrong with that either. Take your time, but
plan it out, do it in that way. It doesn't need to be some dramatic drop and run. Like it's always it's going to be especially what's right for you, and feel into that. Let that be part of the fun, though.
Yes, exactly. And that first time that you do that small step, you're just like, oh, I did it. Oh, yes. And I'll go and do something a little bit bigger, you know?
Yeah, so every time you're like, oh, and then the first step that felt so big now feels like just a pebble stone. So
I know. And it's great then, you know, to look back and think, oh my God, remember when I felt like that? Remember when I thought I couldn't do this? Remember when I thought I couldn't do that?
I have a friend riding, he just left, but he's been riding in Italy this week, and the nostalgia and like, I was like so able to live vicariously because he was at like some of the same, like very close to where I was. And so the landscape is bringing back all of these emotions, and it's been a few years, but they were right there as soon as I saw it. And it's so those memories, they not only stay with you, but when you're re-experiencing it, it's almost like the first time. It's almost creating that experience again for you. So you get to like rehab them.
It is, isn't it? And, you know, it's things like smells as well, you know, not just the visual, but smells and sounds, if you hear those sounds again. So, oh yeah, I totally agree. So what's next for you then, Holly?
What's next for me? I am basically doubling down on the breathwork business, and really this year was the year I started it as a main piece of my life and business and career. And so I really want to commit to it. I've got a little tiny trip travel. I've got a couple plans. September, I'm going camping solo by myself for the first time. Up in Killbear Park. It's really beautiful. It's all granite. And I just was like, you know, the seasons are about to transfer. I'm going to just go and bliss out for a couple days in nature with my dog.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And then I've got a little bike trip after that, just in the States with some friends. And that'll kind of be like the season wrap up. And then I'll go from there.
It sounds serene.
I'm looking forward. I can already see the open water in the morning and just kind of a little campfire and just nice decompression. It
sounds wonderful, and you can just let it all drift away.
And welcome the new season, and just kind of have that pause, because as long as we don't remember to force a pause, we don't really feel like we've done. So like 3 nights, that's plenty. Like you can't say you haven't had time to drop in, but not so long where you're like, okay, I need to get back to something. So.
No, just perfect. Yes. Well, Holly, it's been fantastic. I've absolutely loved this.
Me too. Yeah.
I didn't know where this was taking us, and I've learned a lot myself today as well, and I'm sure our listeners have, you know, so thank you for those few tips that you passed on to us. Brilliant.
My absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed being here. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you know what, like I said earlier, I will put all the links that will take anybody directly to you. So if they want to come to you and find out a bit more.
Any questions, even if they just want to reach out and say, I heard you on the podcast, like, you know, why would this be right for me? Like, I'm always happy to answer any questions and just be a resource. So for sure.
Fantastic. Once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that's it. That's the end of our this week's episode. As I said, thank you to Holly, and we'll see you on the next episode.
And that concludes this episode of Wanderlust Diaries, celebrating the fearless spirit of solo female travellers who are 40 and beyond. I hope you found inspiration, valuable insights, and a renewed sense of wanderlust. Thank you to all our incredible listeners who have joined us on this exciting journey. Remember, age should never stop your quest for adventure, because the world is waiting for you to explore its wonders. And don't forget to join our community on social media to connect with fellow travellers, and subscribe and review us on your favourite podcast platform. All links are in the show notes. Keep dreaming, keep exploring, and stay fearless. Until next time, this is Terry Reynolds signing off from Wanderlust Diaries. Psst, don't keep me a secret. Please tell your friends and fellow travellers.